Hi, good afternoon, everyone. You're very welcome to the 2024 edition of the Green Transition webinar series by Enterprise Ireland. My name is Ankush Shirsat, and I'm the executive in the Sustainability, Renewable Energy, and Agri-Tech department here in Enterprise Ireland. And just to note, today's webinar is being recorded. We'll just give it a minute for everyone to join. We've had about 200 registrations, so we'll just wait for a minute for everybody to join. Thank you. Perfect. So we've hit that 60 mark. So I think we'll just kick off. So again, you're very welcome to the 2024 edition of the Green Transition webinar series by Enterprise Ireland. My name is Ankush Shirsat, and I sit in the Sustainability, Renewable Energy and Agri-Tech department of Enterprise Ireland. I'm also joined by my colleagues, James Day. He'll be handling proceedings behind the scenes for this webinar today. We are delighted to host our first webinar of the 2024 series today. And as I said, the webinar is being recorded and it will be put on the Enterprise Ireland's website for future access. There will be a space for Q&A towards the end of today's webinar. This is the first leg of the webinar series, which will host the 4 webinars in following 4 weeks, starting from today, every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Details of these upcoming webinars will be shared at the end of today's webinar. But just to give you in context, the purpose of this whole webinar series is to reach out to our clients, to our stakeholders, to our colleagues, and raise the awareness around a very broad range of initiatives, supports, and activities that falls into the sustainability space that we are so very focused on. And today we will be talking specifically about developing the sustainability strategy and how to embed the principles of ESG into the business strategy. But we'll also be discussing the sustainability standard, net zero guidelines, and scope 3 emission measurement in the upcoming webinars. We'll also look to cover a couple of broad range of topics such as S in the ESG, water stewardship, biodiversity, carbon reduction technologies in the later half of the year when we launch the second leg of the webinar series. In Enterprise Ireland, sustainability is a key pillar of our own strategy, and we are working to support our clients to reduce their carbon footprint, but equally to address the wider sustainability space and incorporate the sustainability into the business strategy. There are lots of good reasons why companies should do this. Firstly, we all know that it is the right thing to do. We all want to be the responsible citizens and responsible businesses. But from purely commercial point of view, we think there is a real competitive advantage to those companies who embrace sustainability into their business strategy, who bring sustainability into core of what they're doing. And at EI, we are all about helping companies to compete in global markets. And we really think being able to talk about your own green credentials and your wider ESG strategy is going to really help client companies to compete overseas. We have a wide range of training, consultancy, and capital investment supports for Enterprise Ireland clients that are all aimed at helping companies to get started and accelerate the sustainability and decarbonization journey. More information on the EI sustainability supports is available on the website, and we will share the link to those supports along with today's webinar recording. But any clients from local enterprise office, UDROS, IDA, Enterprise Ireland on the webinar today, feel free to reach out to your relevant agencies, contact your development advisor, or you can reach out to Enterprise Ireland Green Inbox for more information. So just about today's agenda. So today we will hear from Bruce Harper and Kira Egan of Antares Consulting on how to develop a sustainability strategy and action plan. And then we'll have a panel discussion with 2 Enterprise Ireland client companies, Portwest and Trenzo. Portwest is a global manufacturer and innovator of workwear, safety wear, and PPE, and Trenzo is a medical device and pharmaceutical consultancy firm for global regulatory and quality compliance. We'll have the time at the end for the Q&A. So at any time during the presentation or panel discussions, please put your questions in the chat function, and we will address those at the end. Just before we move on to the webinar, I would like to highlight our Sustainability Kickstarter workshop initiative that is underway in Enterprise Ireland. Sustainability Kickstarter workshop is a 3-hour online workshop aimed at SME business leaders to help them understand the principles of sustainability and ESG and equip them with the practical skills to embed these principles into a business strategy. It is designed to be an interactive session with breakout rooms, collaboration with peers across the sectors, and there is an ample opportunity for Q&A and action planning. It is a free workshop for EI and Leo clients, and participants at the end of the workshop will walk away with the action plan. The schedule is on your screen there, but we will share those details again with the webinar recording. I also would like to highlight our Green Transition webinar series from last year. So those on-demand webinars are available on the Enterprise Ireland website, and you can access those. And we covered a broad range of sustainability topics there, from what does the climate action journey looks like to SME Climate Hub, which is a great resource for SMEs when looking at their sustainability, but also to voluntary standards like B Corp and different policy, regulatory, and business-focused landscape there. So I suppose we'll move on to for what we are here to talk about. And with that, I would like to introduce you to our speakers for today. So we have Bruce Harper from Antares Consulting. Bruce is a senior sustainability consultant with Antares Consulting with a background in environmental engineering and policy development. Bruce is helping companies to make transformative changes to address the climate action challenge, protect and enhance biodiversity, and embrace the circular economy. Alongside Bruce, we are joined by Kira Egan of Antares Consulting. Kira is a sustainability consultant and project manager with experience in creating sustainability strategies, conducting double materiality assessment, mapping organization to the sustainable development goals, and researching industry best practices and aligning the strategies with the regulation to set ambitious organization goals. So welcome, Bruce and Kira. And with that, Bruce, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ankush, for that warm welcome. Welcome, everybody, and good afternoon. I'm Bruce Harper, and as Ankush said, joined by my colleague, Kira Egan. A little bit about ourselves. Antares, we're an independent sustainability consultant. We're celebrating our 30th birthday this year. And our purpose is to act on the imperative of sustainability one workday at a time. And I suppose what we're trying to convey with that is both the urgency of the situation and also the fact that what we do in our workday matters and can make a real difference. Kira and I are delighted to be joined by Sinead Flynn from Port West. Sinead, do you want to introduce yourself and Port West?
Yes, thank you very much. Interestingly, you guys are celebrating your 30 years. We are celebrating 120 years this year. So Port West are an Irish PPE and safety wear manufacturing business. We manufacture and distribute to businesses globally around the world. Yeah, and we have obviously our Irish side of the business as well. So I'll go into a little bit more about our strategy later.
Thanks, Sinead. And we're also delighted to be joined by Daniel Lane and Connor Flynn from Trenzo. Connor, Daniel, do you want to introduce yourselves and your company?
Yeah, thanks for that, Bruce. I'm Connor. I work at Trenzo. We help companies with their medical device regulatory and quality issues. So we're a consultancy company similar to yourselves in Antares. Thank you for having us here today.
Great to have you. The title of this afternoon's webinar is How to Develop a Sustainability Strategy, but it could just as easily have been called How to Develop an ESG Strategy. Essentially, we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about a shifting of focus away from just looking at the bottom line to having a wider perspective, being more inclusive of environmental and social issues. And I think most people on this call will be familiar with at least some of the European legislation and policies in this area. There's the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, the CSRD. And there's also the EU taxonomy for sustainable activities. There's also the EU Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, and so on. And I think these packages of measures will be successful in mainstreaming sustainability, moving it from a voluntary nice to have to being a key part of an organization's business strategy. And that's because it's going to affect risks and how you manage them. It's going to affect your market access. It's going to affect your cost of capital and your overall competitive advantage. But how do we develop a sustainability strategy? I hear you ask, how do you do it practically? Well, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Ciara, and she's going to talk you through how we like to do it here in Antares.
Thanks, Bruce. So this is our methodology that we use at Antares. We've worked with lots of different companies to, I suppose, develop and refine this approach. That's to say it is our approach, and there's lots of different ways you can do this. So this is just an overview, and we're going to jump into each step in a lot more detail. And we're very fortunate that we have Port West and Trenzo here as well to talk about their practical experience of how they found this process. So the first step really is about, you want to start, where do you start? How do you get started? So these are kind of three key areas. So looking at sustainability, it really is so broad that it does touch on so many areas of your business. So having a cross-functional team can be really beneficial. So this doesn't fall into just one person's desk. Again, having leadership buy-in as part of that team can be really important in, I suppose, giving this authority and importance. And then I suppose the practical stuff that this might require a budget, it does require time, and it definitely requires people and resources. So we might just jump into how this works practically. And Connor, I suppose you are the leadership person that had to buy into this. So it'd be really great just to hear a bit about how that worked for you and your experience with getting started.
Okay, thanks, Ciara. I suppose the trigger for us was our customers were looking for us to fill out forms to show that we were in compliance with some of their ESG policies. So that's how it came to us. Still, we didn't know what to do about that. And I don't particularly like solving problems multiple times. I like to do it once and then throw it over the fence as such. So we did our research. Selma Brennan and EI, very strong DA who we work with, recommended that we talk with you. You gave us some guidance and enough information to go back and start talking about it internally. Of course, like, our mission is to make lives better. So that fits very much with the sustainability or the ESG challenge that everybody in the world is dealing with at the moment. And then we were able to look at it in terms of, does it fit with what we do? Yes. Do we need to do it now? Our customers are looking for it. And then internally, are our staff interested? And people were interested to form a committee and then to work with you. But if there wasn't your advice, the EI grant, to put us in the right direction, it may have taken a lot longer to get going and to get leadership buy-in, as you're talking about.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Connor. And Sinead, I'm interested to hear if you had a similar experience in getting started at Port West.
Yes, we did indeed. Initially, a couple of years ago, about 4 years ago, it was very much customer-led. But when we kind of satisfied that criteria, we wanted to go that step further. And that's when I joined the company as a sustainability manager. And I would very much agree. It's about getting the right people around the table. And it's very much about phrasing sustainability in a way that the leadership team understands, speak their language. And that's what I have found has worked internally here. And then obviously we've worked with you guys on identifying our risks and our opportunities when it comes to ESG, so that we can manage them alongside the financial side of things as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sinead. Really good point there about, I suppose, speaking the same language and showing maybe the commercial value that sustainability can bring. That's brilliant. Great. So then the second step, I suppose, once everyone's mobilized, is figuring out maybe what you're already doing. So at Antares, we call this kind of a gap analysis. of your existing sustainability or ESG activities. Because a lot of companies, you might be doing a lot of work that you don't consider sustainability, but it does actually feed into your overall strategy and action plan. So we've kind of devised this into different categories. So looking at what you're doing in terms of the environment, looking at employees. So this is everything from your employee handbook, what you offer employees, how employees work. Again, looking at suppliers, is there any strong partnerships there? Do you assess your suppliers on their sustainability credentials? Is that important? Community is the kind of area where we see a lot of people are, you might be doing a lot of work there around volunteering, sponsorship, all very relevant to getting started. Looking at the market, what's happening in your industry. Maybe you might want to see what your competitors are doing. And then I suppose to pull in any standards or certifications that you might already have. So some companies will have ISO standards, which are relevant there that feed in. And then also looking at your carbon footprint. So that's your kind of baseline of, well, what are our emissions at the minute? Because if you don't know, you can't really figure out how to reduce them. So this was, I suppose, the first step we did with Trenzo, was really figuring out what you're already doing, measuring your carbon footprint. And that kind of, I suppose, led us in the direction of what was relevant, what we needed to prioritize. So Daniel, you might kind of speak to what kind of came out of that for you and how it was beneficial to see where you needed to prioritize your energy.
Yeah, thanks, Kira. That was a big step for us, I suppose. As a consultancy company, we were very low on the scope 1 and scope 2 sides of our emissions, but when it came to scope 3, it was over 80% of our emissions. So I suppose that was a bit of an eye-opener for us. Our international travel, it wasn't massive, but it was the largest part of our carbon footprint by far. So it's been really helpful for us, I suppose, to visualize that, and it's going to guide us going forward in our own travel policies, that we can, I suppose, make an effort to reduce those scope 3 emissions in the long term.
Thanks, Daniel. And I think as well, what you mentioned there about having that data is really valuable, I suppose, to drive decision making. If you to report upwards on decision, having that kind of concrete data is really valuable. And Sinead, you kind of had a different approach to this. So you looked at the EcoVadis assessment in getting started, which was really interesting, because I know ourselves at Antares, we looked at that, when we had our strategy or action plan when we were further down the road, but you used it to get started. So interested to hear kind of how you found that and what benefits there were to that.
Yeah, we used EcoVadis. We started using it 3 years ago, and it's a really, really good tool. It asks the questions that you might not think about, and asks in the pillar. It's aligned with all of the different legislations, and so it asks them in the correct pillars that you might find your customers are asking for things in. So we found that incredibly helpful to do our first gap analysis, and it really gave us our baseline. And then we worked with the Green Plus grant to work with the consultant to really look at, okay, where do we need to fill out these gaps, and what has EcoVadis not covered that we're missing out on as well, to be in compliance with any legislations we need to be in compliance with.
Yeah, and important to note there, Sinead, as well, is that your EcoVadis assessment is actually tailored to your industry. It's very specific as well.
Yeah, it's super helpful because we're obviously a manufacturer. We're across several different countries operating, both in the EU and outside. It was really, really helpful because it brings up the topics that are most relevant to those countries that you operate in.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Sinead.
So I'm just going to talk briefly on double materiality. It's a bit of a mouthful. Many organizations, though, may already be familiar with financial materiality. And it's basically just a filtering out of what's important or what matters. It's the things that you couldn't leave out and still have a faithful representation of your accounts. So double materiality takes this principle, but looks at the impacts that an organization has on people and the environment. And also looks at the risks and opportunities. So that's your financial risks and opportunities arising from the effect that people and the environment have on your organization. So these impacts can be actual or potential. They have different levels of severity, and they manifest in either the short or the medium or the long term. So essentially what the double materiality process is a process to determine what's relevant and what must be reported on. And so when we're trying to figure out, what might be relevant, the CSRD topics and subtopics, they can be a useful guide. And the SASB relevant issues for your particular industry, they can also be useful to consider what might be important and relevant and that you need to report on. But the most important way of figuring out what's material is talking to your stakeholders. And Ciara's going to talk us through how we like to do that.
Grace. So I suppose depending on your organization, whether you fall under CSRD, if you have to comply, stakeholder engagement is part of that. But also if you're just getting started and you want to create your strategy, this process of actually asking people, what's relevant to you, is really, really impactful. So I suppose this is taking a value chain approach to your strategy. You're not just looking at what's important to your own employees. You're also maybe engaging your suppliers, your customers, your community, and also just considering the impact that you have on nature as part of that as well, is really important. So the nature part can be harder to kind of quantify. So there's science-based targets for nature. Business for Biodiversity is a new platform that's been launched for Irish businesses to help in that space. But what we do at Antares is we do a blend of qualitative and quantitative engagement. So we'd run interviews, focus groups, and surveys to gain insights from all these different groups to feed into the action plan and strategy. And there's always some really valuable ideas that come out of that. And Sinead, I know you're reporting under CSRD, so we're working on the big double materiality assessment together. And I think, I suppose just the level of engagement that Port West has gone to as part of that has been really valuable. I think we've done almost 30 interviews. But I think the value in that has been, brilliant. Just if you wanted to kind of maybe share, how did you get started with that? Like, how did you figure out who was important to talk to and how did you go about that?
Yeah, so obviously thanks to yourselves, we got such great guidance on this. With customers all over the world, it was nearly impossible to, figure out who was most valuable. So we really looked at turnover from customers, spend with suppliers, and in terms of employees who had the most influence within the business. They were the three ways we looked at each of our stakeholders. And engaging with our customers was probably, outside of obviously employees, we got such great feedback from employees, but customer feedback is really, really good because they do not filter. They will tell you exactly what they think. And we got really great feedback from customers and really great, tips and tricks of, what they wanted to see more of in terms of, communication and things like that. They wanted to hear more about what we were doing. So it's just a really worthwhile exercise, in my opinion, even though it has nearly broken me.
Thanks, Sinead. And I think as well to stress that, it might seem a little bit daunting to actually go out and engage these people, to ask them for an interview, but really you're probably asking for maybe 20, 30 minutes of their time. And I know when we spoke to your customers, a lot of them were just delighted that you were considering their input. And they did kind of say, you're the first of our suppliers to ask us about this and ask for our opinion. So it can be a really good way to demonstrate how seriously you're taking sustainability and that it's important to you and you value their opinion.
Yeah.
And yeah, brilliant. And then just, I suppose, Daniel and Connor, we worked with you on this piece more so to feed directly into your strategy. So you aren't caught with CSRD, so you don't have to do the double materiality assessment. But I think the survey piece as part of that as well was quite valuable in coming up with actions that your employees wanted to feed into that. So it's kind of made the strategy process very inclusive. I don't know if you want to add anything, Connor or Daniel, on that stakeholder engagement piece and how you found it.
Yeah, Kira, as you said, it was great to get everybody together as an education piece, to talk about what we'd be interested in doing, give ownership across the business and align us on what we could do. Because I think Sinead made a really critical point early on. If you can't show the value that you're bringing, it's going to fall on its ass a little bit down the path. So trying to spread that knowledge out around the company, tie it to tangible things that people care about and that we can achieve, and then start to show how it adds value to the business going forward. We're early in our process on that, but like we've pulled together, educated it up, and we're moving. Daniel, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, like I can definitely agree that the stakeholder interviews and our sustainability surveys were brilliant for us. It's really helped get us aligned where we do want to focus our ESG goals going down the line. Like I know from our materiality matrix, regulatory requirements came out way on top because that's the area that we can have the biggest impact. That's where we assist our clients primarily. So it was great to see that, you know, everyone was in agreement, and it's really been kind of a guiding beacon for us since then for our ESG goals.
Great. Thanks, guys, for that insight. I think next up on our methodology, we have actually getting to that strategy creation piece. So we just included some kind of key points. So as we mentioned, that stakeholder engagement piece is really valuable. But it's also that your sustainability strategy doesn't have to be totally separate to your business strategy. It probably works better if you look at what your corporate strategy is, align it with your mission and values. Again, best practice is always to align with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So you're contributing to that international effort towards sustainable development. And as Bruce described earlier, working across the 3 pillars of sustainability. So making sure you consider the environment, society, but also that there can be an economic element to this as well that can benefit your business. And I think one thing that we at Antares always include in any action plan that we're working on with clients is training, just to ensure that the people responsible for delivering your action plan have the skills and the tools necessary to do so. So we're fortunate now that Sinead is going to kind of give us an overview of her strategy and what that looks like. So thanks so much, Sinead, for, I suppose, agreeing to share this with us. Really valuable to see what this looks like.
No problem. I suppose the first point I want to make is that you'll notice Kira didn't put 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on them. Start where you can start. That would be my biggest piece of advice. Don't wait, just start. And if you have to go back and rejig a strategy slightly to align it with business, you know, a couple of months down the road when you have additional buy-in, do that. But starting is the most important thing. So in Port West, we defined sustainability as meeting our own needs, that compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. That's an incredibly important definition to Port West. We did not come up with it, but it really resonates with us because we're a 4th generation organization. We want Port West to be accessible down the generations and for generations to come. What we did was we actually broke our Port West Planet strategy down in 5 different areas. So we looked at our products, which includes our supply chain. We looked at our planet, which includes the environment around our operations, our people, which is all to do with our employees. Our place is all to do with our community. Then our principles, which is all around governance. We have adopted the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And as our strategy grows, we are adding. So we started with 3, then we went up to 5, and now we're at 7. And we're going to just keep adding to that as time goes on. Next slide there. So just to give you a bit more of an idea of what falls into each of them. I'm not going to go through this slide in detail because I know I'm on a time schedule here. But when we think about products, we look at the circular design model. So we think about the design, the materials, the chemicals, the end of life from the get-go. And we're lucky that we have our own design team, but also when we engage with external designers, we ask them to follow this model as well. Packaging has been a huge topic and is for everyone. So we're looking at it both the primary packaging as well as the secondary, the transit packaging. And supply chain due diligence. And this is probably the one that I imagine most companies are getting a lot of pressure from their customers on. So it's creating that due diligence, and it's all stemming from the different legislations coming down the line. So it's definitely worth engaging with your procurement team or whoever does the buying within your business, understanding what way are they doing that, and what is the procedure they're following, and is that in line with best practice. There's loads of information out there, especially around the OECD. Use those free resources to understand a little bit better about best buying practices. And then in terms of Planet, we're still in the process of this. So, you know, I've been here for a while, but we're still working on Scope 3 emissions. We are quite a large organization, and it will take time to get that. We've identified our hotspots, but to get the entire thing calculated is going to take a lot of time. Once we identified hotspots, we started looking at things like renewable energy. So we've now invested in solar panels in a number of our sites. We're doing a project at the moment to investigate our logistics and what our logistics partners doing. And then a big gap for us at the moment is biodiversity. We're obviously a textile organization. We rely on biodiversity. So we're currently doing the research and beginning a whole risk and dependencies audit on the business. Then in terms of our people, we always look to our benefits. How are we improving? And probably one of the two main pieces when it comes to your people is always your health and safety and your training hours. So SMETA is something that I mentioned there because this audits our factories. And then we have SEDEX, which is a partner of SMETA for our warehousing to ensure that we're implementing best practice health and safety. And then training. We spoke about it earlier. If your employees are not continuing with their training, they're just going to get left behind, or you as an organization will get left behind. And then our place, it's really important, and it has always been important to Port West to give back to local communities. We always have done so in the 120 years we've been in business, and we've extended that out over the years. So now we have international partnerships. Most recently, we've taken on a new global partnership that we'll be talking about in kind of the next couple of months to come. And then probably the most important for yourselves is the principles side of things, the governance. So lots of organizations won't say this, but I say we are very lucky. We have the CSRD framework to follow. We must follow it. Lots of organizations won't say that because it is quite a large undertaking, but it really sets that framework for you as to where you need to focus your energies and what matters most. We have a huge number of audits and certifications, both product and site. And then obviously we take part in voluntary audits as well, such as EcoVadis, which we have gold in, and we support the UN Global Compact. So that's a really quick overview of our strategy and how we're looking at sustainability here in Port West.
Thanks, Sinead. And I think Daniel and Connor and Trenzo are going to share their strategy with us now as well.
Yeah, I suppose Connor touched on this briefly at the start, but I think our journey started when a lot of our clients started feeling the pressure of CSRD. We ended up with a lot more kind of AVL forms coming our way with queries that we hadn't really seen. Things like modern slavery were kind of new territory for us, and we recognized at that point then that it was time for us to kick off our own sustainability journey. And next slide there, please, Kara. So then as a team, we kind of identified the 5 SDGs that we directly contribute to. I suppose the first 2 there, 3 and 4, being ones that directly impact our team, but we really recognize then 12, 13 and 17 as ones that we can assist our clients with. Given that we're a consultancy company, we really have an opportunity there to make an impact with our clients. Next there, please. And I suppose we're just kicking off our journey in contrast to Port West. So for 2024, we've set very clear goals for our ESG team. From an environmental side, we've done our carbon reduction or our carbon footprint assessment. So we're setting reduction targets for this year. Alongside that, we're developing our carbon reduction plan. And as I touched on earlier, we're looking to create a travel policy reflective of our sustainability goals. From a social side, we're implementing our DEI practices throughout our talent acquisition process. Community volunteering activities are one that's come up a lot this year, and then our employee sustainability awareness program. And from a governance side, I suppose this is where we saw most of it coming from our clients. So we've committed to an EcoVadis assessment to hold ourselves accountable and ensure we meet international best practices. And Sinead has very kindly helped or offered her assistance with that. We're looking to create our sustainable procurement policy alongside that, and then development of our whistleblower, anti-corruption and bribery policies, which we've just ticked off this week, actually.
Great. And I suppose you'll see that this is kind of a stepwise process that we advocate. So, you know, in the initial, we're looking at your baseline to figure out where you are. And then you can do your double materiality assessment, just figuring out what's really important for you. And then you have your strategy. And I suppose the action plan really just falls out of your strategy. If you know exactly where you want to go, then your action plan is just figuring out how you're going to get there. So there's nothing particularly exciting here. This is just, you know, basic principles for good project management. It's maybe easy to say. Sometimes it's harder to put into practice. You have competing priorities, competing for your time and your money. You know, we would advocate just breaking it down into manageable actions, making sure your actions are smart, making sure that there's somebody responsible, and making sure that there's some oversight or governance, so that if actions are not being completed or progressed, then this is picked up, that steps can be taken to put things back on track. And I suppose this is where leadership buy-in is key or critical, or maybe I should say, this is where if you don't have that leadership, if there's a lack of leadership buy-in, this is where it can be exposed. You can do the strategy and you have an action plan, but if it's not getting progressed, that's sometimes because you don't have the required leadership buy-in.
And as Bruce mentioned, I suppose how you deliver that action plan is really important in terms of governance. So how your team meet, who's on the team, how you progress those actions and manage them. So establishing the ways of working really, and then also to communicate your efforts internally. So Daniel mentioned that they're doing an employee sustainability awareness program, but also communicating that externally with your customers and suppliers is really important too. So I might just invite Sinead and Daniel and Connor from Trenzo just to share, I suppose, how you found getting your action plan off the ground, managing it, and I suppose an opportunity to share maybe things you wish you knew when before you started, that it's only with hindsight you've learned the importance of them. So maybe if we go to you first, Connor and Daniel.
Yeah, I was thinking I might send this over. Daniel works more practically on the ground. From my position, getting involved with Antares early on and you bringing us through the process gave me great peace of mind that I could step away, that my team weren't overloaded having to figure stuff out with no information. But from that, I'll pass on to Daniel.
Yeah, I think forming our ESG committee, we've done quite well. Our ESG committee is made up of 6 people, and we're a smaller company, so that's quite a large portion of the company, and every portion of the company is well represented there. One thing that I think we've done particularly well since getting the action plan off Antares is dividing the team into groups of 2, with each group of 2 tackling either ES or G on a quarterly cycle. So I suppose that gives everyone on the ESG committee experience in each of the different aspects, and it really gives kind of fresh views on it every 3 months. So I think that's something that's we really benefited from, and I wish I could say I was the genius behind that idea, but I definitely wasn't.
Thanks, Daniel. I think that's a really interesting approach to delivering it, and I think as well it kind of ensures the whole team is upskilling and responsible for the different areas, that it doesn't fall on particular people. Then Sinead, any advice you have to give?
Yeah, so with hindsight, I would have done what Connor did and engaged with you guys much earlier. You know, you've been the absolute dream to work with. But another thing that I felt like held us back slightly is that people felt like they didn't know enough. And you don't need to know it all. There's so many resources out there. Enterprise Ireland have a good few webinars. And I know while it is quite, you know, a time investment, it is needed to understand, but they're free to access, lots of them. They're everywhere at the moment, especially around CSRD or sustainability reporting. They're absolutely everywhere. Jump on them, start learning, because you don't know what you don't know until you get on some of these webinars and start learning from the people that are experts in the area. And I would have promoted that a lot more internally and have started to do so a lot more now.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, guys. That's really useful advice. And I think that really came from you, Sinead, that ongoing education piece being part of the methodology is really crucial. Because we know sustainability is kind of a fast moving area. So keeping up is, really important. So I think that's the end of our methodology and our process. But we do have time for Q&A, I think, Bruce.
Yeah, super. Before we go to Q&A, Sinead, I remember talking to you previously and you were talking about the importance of bringing your marketing team in and not leaving them off on their own, disconnected from what you're doing on sustainability. Do you want to talk us a little bit through that?
Yeah, I suppose it's a learning for me is that from the get-go, I would have had marketing at the table, having these conversations with them so they understand a little bit better. Really, your commercial opportunities when you look at sustainability is found through your marketing. The more you speak to your customers about it, the more opportunities you find. And we find that when we increase our marketing around sustainability, when we get to speak one-on-one with our customers about what we're doing, we get way more engagement. And we've actually started to track that now financially as well. There was a very, very important point made by, I believe it was Eugene or someone within Antares, that we've seen some of the big public organizations now are not willing to work with organizations who don't have a sustainability strategy. So it is incredibly important that you have one, and that's just for market access. That's not even to sell yourselves. If you do not have the strategy in place, you will get locked out of the market. And having a team that can communicate that is really, really important.
Thanks, Sinead.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kira and Bruce. That was really informative and insightful. And of course, to get the perspective of the client companies, having been through the process of developing the sustainability strategy and action map. And for many of our clients, I mean, we are hearing the stories like or the different drivers coming their way, whether it's regulatory or market drivers on a global scale. Now we can see examples like AstraZeneca asking their clients to align to science-based target initiative by certain time frame. So no, it was really, really informative to hear that. And again, like that customer driver, Connor explained, the ESG policies were being sought after by their own customers. So of course, I mean, we're seeing many examples of client companies now bidding for tenders and now being asked to present those sustainability and carbon reduction roadmap. But just like in terms of you explained the double materiality assessment there, and I know like in terms it is not mandatory for non-listed SMEs, but just Kira, maybe if you have to explain it in simple words what the materiality assessment is and how company can, and like you mentioned that you cannot manage what you can't measure, you know, when it comes to kind of driving your sustainability roadmap, how company can look at materiality assessment and it is a best practice to do, probably even if it's not mandatory, but how company can go about it.
Yeah, so the double materiality process is kind of I suppose it's looking two ways. So it's looking at, you know, what are the risks and opportunities for your business. So what are the risks, for example, associated with climate change, but maybe what are opportunities as well that, you know, as we mentioned, by having a strategy and action plan, you know, new products, new customers. But But I think the biggest part really about the double materiality is looking at what the impact of your business is. So, you know, what's your impact on the environment, on your workers, in the community you work in? So it's this kind of new lens of looking at what's the actual impact in your whole value chain of your operations, rather than just, you know, inside your four walls. And the double materiality piece, it does ask you to kind of look at that financially as well, which is kind of new to the CSRD. So as Sinead mentioned, it is a big piece of work. So if you don't have to comply with the CSRD, it might not be relevant for you right now if you're just getting started with your strategy. But I think the stakeholder engagement piece, looking at your value chain, that is part of the double materiality assessment. So that first step, you know, you're already starting to work on that. So that's probably how companies could get started with that to feed into their strategy. So asking your customers, what is an opportunity you see for us? Are there any risks you see? What impact do you think we have? That's a really great way to get started.
Great, and not knowing where to start. For many of our companies, that's a challenge, and I think a lot of companies on the call today can take a lot out from today's webinar and from the experience of Sinead and Connor there. And Sinead also highlighted a couple of voluntary sustainability standards such as EcoVadis. They used it for their own kind of sustainability roadmap. I think that's a great example of looking at sustainability standard to communicate probably your credible sustainability impact, and then using different frameworks for that credible reporting. I'm just looking at a couple of questions there in Q&A there. So we have a question from Niall there. Are there any other platforms other than EcoVadis, or where can I find out more? So just from EI's last year's webinar series, Niall, we held a webinar on B Corp, which is the social and governance standard. But Bruce and Kira, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, so there's EcoVadis. If you were to ask me, I'd say probably the bigger companies would go down EcoVadis. It has some supply chain integrations that can be quite useful for the big multinationals. Smaller, kind of more retail, B Corp might be interesting. They have a free to download B Corp impact assessment. It's a very good way of just looking at all of the different aspects of sustainability, some of which you might not have considered. Kira, want to add?
Yeah, just to add to that, Bruce, I suppose I've gone through the EcoVadis assessment for us at Antares. I suppose we're an SME, but I found it really useful just to check we have all of our policies, make sure that we're, I suppose, aligning with international best practice as well, not just what's happening in Ireland. And what's really useful about that tool as well is you can get started just like the B Corp. You can go in and see what's in there that's relevant for you. And then you can decide in like 6 months, a year that you want to actually submit it. So you don't have to submit. There's no like time frame on it. So it is just a good way to go in and have a look and just see what's in there. Start a list maybe as well.
Absolutely. And Niall also mentioned, sorry, Bruce, go ahead.
Sorry, Ankush, there was another question in there on carbon footprinting or carbon accounting, asking what we did. We use the greenhouse gas protocol. That's kind of the main one that's used. We do also offer the ISO standard 14064, I think. But if you're just getting started and you don't want to bring in consultants to do it for you, there is the Climate Toolkit for Business. It's a free resource. It has some software built in. So if you're just getting started and you don't want to bring in the consultants, I'd point you there.
Absolutely, and as Bruce mentioned, it's a free resource, and also when we engage with companies for the green supports, and the application form also has a space where companies can go to the Climate Toolkit for Business and enter their electricity, gas, and other usage, and it gives them their estimate of carbon footprint, and at the same time, it also gives you a carbon action map and also different supports that are available from different state agencies such as EI or CEI and IDA. So I think it's a very good tool to highlight. Thank you, Bruce. I think one of the questions there is, Kira, how did you choose which UN SDGs were best to adopt to your companies? It's probably for Sinead and Connor, but yeah, I mean, you explained that mapping of SDGs to the sustainability strategy. So if you want to probably reflect on this one.
Yeah, I suppose as you there's 17 SDGs. So for example, SDG 4 is on quality education. So that's the SDG, but there's actually sub-targets below that. So actually just going onto the UN Sustainable Development Goal website, reading through those targets and figuring out which ones you can directly contribute to. It's a really good way to start. But if Sinead or Daniel wants to add anything to that, I suppose you've gone through it to apply them to your business as well.
That's exactly what I did. I went into each SDG. I looked at our activities that we had within our business. And actually, it was one of the very first things I did within the first 3 weeks of starting here. So I could ask more questions about what activities we had going on that I wasn't aware of yet, because I was so new to the business. And I uncovered that we were doing a huge amount in terms of sustainability, but nobody had ever actually put it into that category. So it is a really good way of identifying which actions feed into SDGs and are therefore technically sustainable actions.
Yeah, and it's something that's covered in the Kickstarter workshop. So, you know, we advocate taking a value chain approach, because sometimes the SDGs that are relevant right between your four walls on site doing what you're doing are of course relevant, but you can have some massive impacts up and down your value stream. As I said, it's covered in the Kickstarter. Come along. It's a well spent 3 hours.
I would say I really enjoyed that. So our process, Antares proposed 5 of them. We were all on the call, we discussed them, went into breakout groups, and we completely changed them. It was interesting how different our perceptions of where we could add the most value were, and that those discussions were eye-opening, I think, for everybody on the call, for us. And then Daniel, didn't it go into the ESG committee and then you worked on it from there, isn't that right?
It did, yeah. And I think the fact that the whole company had some input in it was a great opportunity to get some buy-in around it. I think it was good feedback out of the stakeholder interviews as well, that we were all kind of aligned on what SDGs we had chosen.
Yeah, and that's also where the cross-functional team really comes in. You'll find people from HR might be more interested in the social aspects, and people from operations and facilities may be more interested in the engineering, environmental side of things. So everybody comes to this with their own lens, and it's important to ensure that you have that diversity of opinion.
Perfect. That's great. We have a sector-specific question there from Gareth. Suppose, is the construction product supply chain likely to have its own platform or use some of those already mentioned? Bruce, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so the construction sector in some ways is leading the way in terms of EPDs, environmental product declarations. So they're like a life cycle assessment that goes with an individual product. And that's something we're seeing a lot more of, you know, particularly in the pharma sector. They're saying, listen, we want to operate in the future, we want to build a new site, but we want to ensure that it's low carbon, not just in its operations, but the embodied carbon, so that carbon that's involved in the building of the factory. And so they're putting limits on that now. So if you want to build that factory for them, you have to show exactly how much carbon is in each component of that building. So they will all require EPDs. So yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of, no company would be able to tackle this challenge on its own. So that's where I think the support from Enterprise Ireland and other state agencies are really important. So you mentioned LCA there, Bruce, and I've definitely we support companies to develop that internal capability to get those EPDs or prepare for CSRD reporting. So all those kind of internal capability development activities are covered under EI green supports, whether it's Green Plus or you're looking to do an LCA under one of our Green Start, another consultancy. But also there are ample amount of training and consultancy support from Enterprise Ireland at every stage of your journey of sustainability. But yeah, no, that's great, Bruce. And another question we have there. Are there any specific ISO and international certifications that an organization should strive towards to best advertise how good your ESG is?
Yeah, so I would say the ISO process is constantly undergoing work. There's technical working groups developing new standards all the time. Right now, I would say for international, I would say EcoVadis is probably the big one that's the preeminent standard out there, or the European Sustainability Reporting Standards developed under the CSRD. I would say they're the big two.
Yeah. Yeah, and our next webinar next Wednesday actually focuses on sustainability standard, and the theme is how to get one step ahead of the legislative, regulatory, and social change. So if you are free, of course, please do join us for our next webinar that will focus on the sustainability standard, and you'll be able to probably get more information about that on the international standards. But of course they are a very good way to probably communicate the transparency and credible impact of your sustainability activities, I suppose. So do we have any more questions? I think that's it. But no, thank you so much, Bruce and Kira. That was really informative and insightful. And just before we close today's session, I would like to thank also to our participants and highlight our upcoming webinars. So like I said, next week we'll be talking about the sustainability standard, but then on the 1st of May, we will be talking about the net zero emissions and in line with the voluntary standards, which some of them were highlighted in today's webinar. But also Daniel mentioned the scope 3 emissions for Trenzo, how important that was to measure the scope 3 emissions. So we have a webinar dedicated to how to measure the scope 3 emissions on 8th of May. So please, if you're available, do join us for our upcoming sessions. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all our panels and speakers, Connor, Daniel, Sinead, Bruce, and Kira. Thank you so much. It was really insightful, and we'll join you, and we'll see you in the next week's webinar. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I know.